They rolled up my private drive like they owned the coastline. 3 SUVs crunching gravel, a silver sedan in front, with a plate that basically said, "I make the rules," and out stepped Kendra Vale with the cardigan, the sunglasses, the haircut that asks for a manager. Before breakfast, she pointed up at my lighthouse like it was a stray dog that wandered into her yard and said, "You've voted. It violates our aesthetic. It's over 30 feet. It wasn't approved. You have 72 hours to take it down." And I just stood there with rust and salt on my hands thinking, yeah. That happened, then I tapped my phone. The camera on the tower rotated with that little motor whine, and I said, "You're on video and you're on my land. You want to talk about authority? Let's talk about the anchor. Chained to that boulder, original survey marker. 1954. This bluff is deeded to my family, older than your bylaws, older than your opinions. You know what I mean." She tried to smile while her jaw tightened. Said, "Submit your papers to our review board." And I said, "I don't answer to your board," and then I walked back up the path, like my boots were heavier than they were. Heart tapping at my ribs, mad enough to taste metal, because I've been that quiet guy. People figure we'll fold the one who gets steamrolled by letters with emblems on them. But I don't fold anymore. I bring receipts. Sunday, I went into the basement where my grandfather kept our history, wrapped in oil paper and twine, blueprints curled like seashells, county maps with grease pencil scars, a state coastal rights agreement with his neat signature. I scanned everything, made copies, backed up the backups, slid it all into a binder that could sink a small boat. Then Monday. 9, I took a number at the county building, and Duffy in zoning read my stack with the patience of a man who argues with maps for sport. And finally, he looked up and said, "This is ironclad. Your parcel predates their development by decades. The scenic overlay they love to wave around got invalidated. When the state reclassified this stretch, they don't have jurisdiction over your bluff. So I left with official confirmations and a coastal commission contact, who told me to call. If anyone played dress-up as their staff, I hired a courier for a cease and desist, dropped a copy with the sheriff, and drove home thinking maybe that would slow them down. It didn't. They started with the cheap shots. A fluorescent sticker slapped on my mailbox that read, "Unapproved structure." It's my dad's brass box on an oak post with a federal ID number stamped clear and permanent. So I took it to the post office, and the clerk said, "Title 18 federal property. Postal inspector will love this." Got photos, and I handed him prints while he stapled, like it was the best part of his day. Then there was a white pickup idling at my gate, a guy in a reflective vest measuring my driveway with a laser level, like he was defusing a bomb. He showed me a map with roads and structures, but no property lines. And I showed him my laminated survey and traced the line with one finger. "You are 74 feet outside their boundary, which means you're trespassing, which means you should leave now." And he left so fast, he forgot his tape. I installed a second camera. And that night came the syrupy voicemail from the Environmental Review Committee. Anonymous reports of invasive species. Schedule a visual inspection in 48 hours. If we don't hear back, sure, I forwarded it to my lawyer and waited, then flyers shoved in my storm door with a grainy photo of my tower and a big red X, and the words, "Unsafe structure community at risk," signed by concerned residents of Mariners Ridge. I brought them to Deputy Santos, who called it targeted harassment, and told me if anyone set foot on my land without a court order to call, they'd send a unit. I decided to put daylight on it, so I walked into their open meeting folding chairs. Lemonade that tasted like permission slips Kendra at the podium mid-sentence until she saw me and froze. I took the mic and said, "Name's Mason. Reed Raven. Bluff, 2 minutes is plenty." Then, I held up the deed with the Fresh County stamp if this proves my lighthouse sits on sovereign private land, not subject to your charter, and I raised the cease and desist and the police report. The room murmured. Someone clapped, and I said, "Your jurisdiction ends at the eastern fence line. Stay on your side of it. If anyone from this board steps onto my land again without a court order, I will press charges and I will name individuals." Then I left, while she reached for a smile that wouldn't come in the lot. An older guy in a mechanic's jacket shook my hand and said, "Name's Otis. They fined me for a tool trailer in my own driveway. You need anything?" "Photos, testimony. I'm your neighbor." And on the drive home, I started seeing little window signs along the bluff private property. Not Ridgeland. The tide was turning quietly, steadily, the way tides do. Friday, the storm came sideways like it had a score to settle. I was on the catwalk when I saw 3 ponchos hugging the fence line, moving fast and low. I flipped the floodlights and washed the slope in white. They froze. One had bolt cutters. I hit record on the external cam and trudged down in unlaced boots. "You cut my fence," I yelled over the wind. No damage occurred. Clipboard said erosion. Risk assessment during a storm. I asked standard protocol. She lied without looking up. The kid with a laminated badge finally said they'd been told my bluff fell under emergency inspection authority, and I asked by who. And he said the environmental task force, and I said the one that doesn't exist, silence except for rain. I told them to leave, they left, and I sent the footage to Santos and to the commission and got a call back that what I filmed was likely trespass with a side of impersonating an officer. If those badges came from a home printer, and I thought maybe that would end it. You know how you hope for the grown-ups to show up and blow the whistle. But the next evening, a black SUV idled outside my gate, and a man in a charcoal suit named Gideon Parr, counsel for the board, handed me a manila envelope. Like it was a magic trick inside, was a petition to annex my parcel, packed with vague statutes, and a claim that my lighthouse caused unmonitored maritime interference. I asked if they wrote it on a napkin, and he smiled that thin lawyer smile and said there was already a preliminary hearing on the calendar, and if I failed to contest in 10 days, the board could proceed with enforcement. So I hired my own counsel, Inez Park, a former municipal prosecutor who reads bad law like a menu. She laughed, said the buffer ordinance they cited got repealed years ago, and maritime interference isn't even a term, and we filed for injunctive relief. Then Thursday, we watched a judge flick through their filing with the face of a person who doesn't have time for cosplay. She asked, "For precedent." Gideon started on the spirit of the law, and she said the law has a letter. The spirit is for greeting cards dismissed with prejudice, advised them to stop contacting me unless it was a friendly wave from across the road. That should have been the fade-out porch swing. Cold beer credits. But that night, someone put a rock through my workshop window. 3 cameras caught the plate. The driver confessed by midnight he was the son of a temporary board member, and now the DA opened a criminal investigation subpoenas. Seized records, the environmental task force turned out to be a letterhead and a costume. There were fake inspection forms, backdated letters, an unlicensed contractor posing as county staff. The DA held a press conference. Kendra resigned before lunch. Half the board dissolved like sugar in rain. And a week later, I got a letter from the bar saying Gideon's license was suspended. Pending review, then he filed a personal lawsuit against me for defamation and interference, because some people don't pivot to grace. They pivot to paperwork. We went to Central District metal detectors, stale coffee. He looked smaller without the SUV suit. Wrinkled hair, neat, but not sharp. The judge tapped her pen twice and said, "You're alleging reputational harm, while under investigation for the acts that allegedly harmed your reputation." My attorney slid an affidavit from a former board member, tying him to the fabricated petition and the coaching. And the judge denied his motion and told me I could pursue malicious prosecution. If I wanted, we stepped outside into a gray afternoon, and my lawyer said we can hit back. And I held the folder that could have burned down what was left of his career and said, "Not today," because winning and being right aren't always the same thing. And I wanted my life back, not his. The neighborhood softened like weather after a front. Not all at once, but enough folks who watched from behind blinds brought pie and paint. Otis set up a folding table, and we had a potluck under the lower deck. A quiet guy from the shipyard said he used to hurry past my fence because he didn't want to get written up for staring. And now it felt different. I took down the last "no trespassing" sign, not because trouble can't find me, but because I'm done living braced for it. And one morning a crayon drawing showed up tucked under the old anchor. A kid's version of the Lighthouse tilted, and brave with the words, "Thanks for keeping the light on." I framed it and hung it in the stairwell, where the gulls peck at the window, and if you want the simple ending, here it is. We stood up, they backed down. The light still turns, and the sea still doesn't care about anyone's forms. Here's the twist, though, because life keeps a few spare storms in its pocket. A letter landed from a splinter group, talking about reorganizing and restoring standards and safety and consistency. They didn't mention my lighthouse. They didn't have to. I could hear it between the lines. I set the letter on the workbench and looked out at the water and thought about how people confuse control with community. And I told myself, I'll do what I did the first time. If I have to, I'll keep the camera pointed the right way. I'll bring receipts. I'll trust the quiet neighbors who hate bullies, and I'll keep the beam sweeping the dark. Because some folks only understand boundaries when the light hits their eyes and makes them squint. Some only stop when a judge tells them to, and most just want to live without being told their home is an eyesore on someone else's brochure. So tell me where you land. What's the line between protecting a neighborhood and policing the people in